everybody. Welcome to the channel. This is Books by Adrian. Today's guest with me here, I gotta get that right, this way, Charlie Dorsett.
Hello.
How are you?
I am doing pretty good today, and this is like the best time to be talking about this because I just started drafting a new book in a new setting.
Oh, perfect.
World building is so fresh on my
Yeah.
mind right now because
Good.
I'm trying to
That's
make sure
perfect.
it's actually in the book.
So, Charlie doesn't bury the lead. We're talking world building. This is going to be our introductory episode, as world building is going to be a theme on this channel for the month of April. We have two follow-up episodes to this one where we're going to keep talking about world building. But we're going to start where we're supposed to start, with Charlie here, who is, in my opinion, the AuthorTube expert on world building. I like bringing on people who know what they're talking about, and Charlie here does. If you are at all interested, can't talk today, in world building, make sure you check out Charlie's channel. I have all of his information down below. You can get to all his stuff from there. And go over there if you're not already a fan of his channel. Subscribe, like, comments, all that stuff. Charlie, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do on your channel and what people can expect from you over there?
Occasionally, I do actual videos where I talk about things, but with all of the other stuff going on lately, I've not been doing that all that much. Lately,
yeah, videos have become very rare on my channel as well.
Lately, it's been the live streams. We do productivity streams on Wednesdays and Fridays, starting at 5 p.m. Eastern. I always have to do the time conversion in my head because time zones are the devil.
They'll mess you up.
We generally go for 3-4 hours, sometimes longer. I have been known to do some forever streams over there. I think 9.5 was the longest that we got into, but
Whoa.
We were all on a roll, and it was just like, I think I'm going to stop. And like the chat was like, keep going, keep going. It's like, all right, let's go.
All right.
And so we have fun. And
I think I caught one of those forever streams, as you call them, like way at the tail end of it.
Yeah, because to me, the most important thing that we as writers can do is have fun with our work, because if we're not enjoying it, our readers will not enjoy it.
Amen to that.
So at least you have to find the point where you can inject your own fun into it, whether that's in the drafting, the outlining, or the editing, because depending on what kind of a writer you are, one of those is going to be the place where you just come alive when you're writing and just find out where that is, know where that is, and just live in there as much as you can, or the book's not going to come alive for other people. And so that's what we try to do on my channel, is get people into that place.
That's beautiful, man. That's a really nice mission statement. You know what I mean? To just have this particular thing in mind with everything that you do. Let's just get people having fun doing their writing so that other people will have fun reading it. I like that, man. I like that. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for being here. It's another live stream Sunday. We took a week off last week for Easter because, you know, holidays, whatever. I do want to remind everybody of two things very briefly. Number one is that because of taking that week off last week, we have a bonus episode this month, which is not on a Sunday. It is not a live stream Sunday. It is 2 days from today. It is Tuesday at 4 p.m. It is a short 1-hour interview with Kesley Smith, representing Greenleaf Book Group. For anyone who's not familiar, Greenleaf Book Group is a hybrid publisher. So whereas you have the traditional publishing route and then the indie author self-published route, they're that middle space where, as they advertise, the writer maintains creative control and rights to their property, whereas they, Greenleaf Book Group, take care of all the publishing stuff, setting you up with an editor and, you know, all that's getting you in stores, all that stuff. All the kind of like headachy stuff that authors don't know they have to deal with before they get into it. So it's going to be a really interesting interview. I'm going to hit her with a lot of questions because my entire route in writing this novel has been with the goal of self-publishing but I didn't know that hybrid publishers were a thing. So my interest is piqued. Let's check this out and learn about it. The other thing I wanted to remind everybody about is the contest going on right now, the flash fiction contest going on my channel. 800 words max. The deadline is in 4 days. I might have to give people some wiggle room. I've gotten a few entries, but I feel like we should get a little more. But right now, the 15th is the deadline. No more than 800 words. You don't have to do 800 words. You can send me 300, whatever. Just send me a nice, cool flash fiction story that's going to tug at the heartstrings and get emotions flowing. That's what I'm looking for out of the winner, because the prize is that it will be, well, I'll take an audiobook reading of it, and I'm going to send it to a musician, and he is going to compose a score for the story, and he's going to do this live in front of us on the Livestream Sunday, where he teaches us about writing and how music affects storytelling. So please, any genre and any theme, write me a short story. And you can go to booksbyadrian.com, scroll down just a little bit. You're going to see the flash fiction contest and a button to submit. Click on the button and it will populate everything. And all you got to do is attach your file and hit send. So very easy. Just go write a story and send it to me. And let's see who's going to get this musical score treatment. All right. Sounds fun. Had you heard about that yet, Charlie?
No, I've been so out of the loop on everything, but yeah, music is such a powerful tool. On my second channel, I actually post my music, and so far none of the stuff that I've done over there has got lyrics to it. So it's always so much fun to try to tell a story without being able to use words.
Yeah.
And seeing who comes back to you with the story that you had in mind, and when they don't, what they got from it instead.
Right.
It's a trip.
It's also very interesting to me how it influences writing, because I'll listen to film scores and other instrumental music without lyrics in it when I'm writing. And regardless of what my outline is or what my plans are for that day, once I get into a zone in writing and the music is flowing and the songs change and the emotions going up and down, it's affecting how I write. The faster the music, the more like action oriented my scenes become. And then the slow down comes and everybody's kind of talking, and it just creates a flow to the writing in addition to, helping with reading and the story. So very interesting stuff. And we're going to talk all about that.
Yeah, I found that with my own work. I also think that every writer should, if they're musically inclined at all, make a playlist for the work that they're doing that are maybe for the characters, maybe for the story, however it works best for you, because it does help so much into getting into the mindset and into the mood and the vibe of the setting, because a lot of that's intangibles that you have to somehow make tangible in words. And so if you can get yourself feeling it, you have the vocabulary more readily at hand.
Yeah, I find that too, especially like I'll do the playlist for each character. So depending on who I'm writing that day as the point of view, I'll switch up my playlist that I'm listening to. And like Faye is more of a fantasy character. She's kind of this hippie, psychedelic, witchy character. So I have a lot of like fantasy scores in hers, and also like, just like some trippy stuff in there. And then for the detective, I have a more like film noir, crime drama, gritty kind of scores that are coming from movies like Seven and stuff like that, And then I've got like the bounty hunter character who brings a lot more of the action, but also a lot more of the comedy into it. So his playlist is a little more lighthearted and action packed. Like it just has like more exciting scores, like stuff from Inception and stuff like that really gets, like the pace going. So absolutely, I agree 100%.
Whether you like the show or not, you might want to. Yeah, whether you liked the show or not, you might want to check out Ludwig Göransson's soundtracks for The Mandalorian.
Oh man,
they've got some really good, like lighthearted moments, some good pacing stuff. Like Ludwig Göransson is such a good like musician just in general, but his scores, I write to a lot of his stuff.
Yeah, I haven't added the Mandalorian soundtrack into my rotation. It hadn't occurred to me yet until you said it. But yes, you're right. That score is incredible. And I might have trouble separating it from Star Wars though, with like when I'm writing, you know what I mean? Like that's another thing that you have to think of too, is if it's too
Yeah,
familiar, it might
yeah,
also influence what you're writing.
yeah.
That's interesting.
I shared my playlist for the Kristen Wyvern setting that I'm writing in recently because people didn't. This is where the world building really comes in. People didn't realize like how dark the setting was going to be.
Hmm.
And I was like, yeah. Here, this is what I'm listening to while I'm writing it, and like here, just so you understand, like I'm going for a
So
very
you see
bubble
what I
bath
see.
aesthetic. So people hear like, oh, there's like all these like fuzzy animals and stuff, and I'm like, yes, that are like drenched in blood and nightmare fuel. Like, yes,
Like, yeah, that's where I am when I'm writing it. Like that's just what's coming out.
yeah,
Yeah, I hear that,
yeah.
man.
So that's also a really nice thing to help get your audience to come along with you, especially as you're getting the work done. Is in sharing those playlists, if you feel willing to do that, they start getting a sense of like from the little tidbits that you're leaking out there about little ideas here and there and characters, and then they hear the music and they can start soundtracking that in their own head and getting
Yeah.
excited and amplified, because we as writers have a hard time doing a lot of those drops that you see from musicians in movies and TV shows, because
Mhm.
I don't want to share my zero draft like
Yeah.
snippets from my work that much because they're trash. Like a lot of it's, comes together in the editing,
Dude,
but being able to find those little things that we can share is really important.
I just finished my first draft for my novel, and it's a complete mess. Man, like when you step away from it for like 2 seconds and then look at it again, you're like, Jesus, I have a lot of work. But it's like, it's the first draft. It's done. Second
And
draft is coming.
the warning I really want every writer to take to heart is you will always feel that way about your stuff. Like
Oh man.
I've been, my first book came out about 15 years ago. And I go back and read some of my earliest stuff, especially like the Fates Horror stuff, where I was with a traditional publisher. I had a really good editor, and I read that, and I'm just like, this is such garbage. How did he let me get away with releasing this? Like, it's not what I want, because every work you learn more, every work you improve, every
Yeah.
work you see things that you wish you hadn't done in previous works that are honestly fine. They're
Yeah.
fine. It's just we have that critical eye, so always bear that in mind.
Well, I always like to remind people that what it means is that you're a better writer today than you were
Yeah,
yesterday. And if so facto, you're a better writer today than you were 15 years ago. So yeah, your first work is always going to be your worst. And that's a really like daunting thing to think about when you're writing your first. You know what I mean? Like I'm putting out my debut novel and everyone's reminding me this is going to be your worst book. And I'm like, "Thanks." That's really going to help me write it like a lot better. But they're right. Like you have to just make your peace with that as good as you can make it, it's always going to be your worst because it was your first and you're still learning. You're going to grow. You're going to become a better writer.
I like to use music analogies for that, because like Led Zeppelin 1 for at the time was a great rock album. It's an amazing rock album, but you compare that to like 4 or
Yeah.
Coda, and like
Yeah.
I mean, for its time it was a great album, and compared to other bands, yeah, it's a great album, but compared to their work, it's just fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
And you just got to be willing to accept that, because you will grow, you'll mature, and you'll change.
Yeah. Um, I see that a lot with bands that I follow for a long time. Is I'll go back to that first album and nostalgia will still be there.
Yeah.
But objectively, you're like, yeah, it's not as great as like whatever their greatest album was. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Let me take a look at the chat here, see what's going on. It looks like we got Tom in there. All right, so he's got us on at work. We got Megan McCarthy in there. Welcome, everybody. Keep on coming in. Now, so world building. This is something that I have a lot of fun with. And every time I start it anew for a new project, I tend to try a new way to go about it. Like now that I finished the first draft of the novel, I am setting my sights towards the sequel, and I'm opening up the world like a lot in that one. I'm literally going to a planet that we weren't on the first time. So like everything is gonna explode in that one. And so I'm doing a whole new mess of world building for over there, which I've already done some stuff for, obviously, because I've set up the series. But like now I'm getting in there and I'm trying like some new apps, some new like visual ways to do stuff. So I wanted to talk about our sort of methods, and one of the things that popped up this week is Jenna Moresi put up a video on world building. And just because it happens to be on the same week as me, I was like, okay, I can't not address it. I like let's
Right.
like I have to talk about it because otherwise, like, what are we doing here? She gave a list of 10 things that uh, she's looking for in world building that she recommends, and I kind of condensed it a little bit to 6 because I felt that some of them were sort of tied together. So we're just going to run through them one by one here and kind of pick them apart together. The first one is
Yes.
So understanding your genre and understanding your audience. These were 2 separate points in the Jenna Mercy video, but I put them together because I feel they're very much connected.
I would even add a third to this, and that's understand your goals. Because from the very beginning, there are 3 main types of world building that you will engage in. There's open world, then there's the kind of sandbox, and then there's the for this novel. So you need to know what you're wanting to do right out from the gate. So if you're just writing a one-off novel that you believe is going to be a one-off novel, only worry about building what you need for that book. That's it. That's all you have to do.
Yeah.
Everything else is just taking up time that you don't need. If you're thinking this is going to be part of a series, that's where you're doing kind of a sandbox. You're kind of seeing a little bit around the edges of what the broader world would be, so you don't have the really common problem that you see in a lot of sequels where it was intended to be a one-off and then it was so popular that, hey, let's do more. So you then have to basically make book 2 and here's all the things you didn't see.
Yeah.
So like for Dune is a great example for this because I think a lot of people have read it, where the first book was meant to be the only book. All of the world building goes into that one story. So he literally had to write a bridge novel, that's Dune Messiah, that shows, oh, wait, there's this whole other universe out here that we didn't even talk about before. And here's all the other things that are going on that can be problems later down the road. So if you think you're going to be doing a series or building a world that you want to revisit over and over and over again, start thinking around those edges, like what's around that corner, what's the politics and stuff.
Give yourself room to grow. In other words, give yourself space for when you come back to this world for you to be able to expand everyone's knowledge of it.
And then if you're a lunatic like me, you engage in the third type of world building, which is what I'm doing for my current series, because one of my goals as a writer is I wanted a tabletop role-playing game based on one of my worlds. Okay. I love tabletop role-playing games. It's something that's meant a lot to me my entire life, which means all of my world building has to be full-on open world. The world has to be developed enough that other people will be able to want to tell stories in it to play the game.
Right.
That's the widest, broadest category of world building. And it's hard. It's really tricky because my instincts are very much like, I only need this for this book. I only need this for this book. But no, I need to know the history of the various countries and the problems and getting my maps done that.
It's an epic, like it has to be a real place. Yeah.
It has to feel real so that people will want to play the game. And I bring this up at the beginning because so many writers, especially on their first work that I talk to, are doing open world building for a one-off novel.
Yeah. Going way too far. And that's where knowing your genre, knowing your audience comes in, because different genres are going to require different things from you in the world building. Different audiences want a different level of specificity and whatnot. in their world building as they're reading. And so knowing your audience, knowing your genre, what is typical in these, books. And then, as you say, do what's best for your novel, for your one book, taking into account if it's a series or not.
Yeah, make sure that you're staying focused, because if we're not producing us, if we're not making, I hate to say it this way, but if we're not making a product at the end of the day, it is truly a hobby. Like, you need to know what you're putting out in the world.
Yeah.
So if you're making a book, your goal always has to be that book or that series, and everything else needs to be in service of that, so that you are keeping yourself on focused, and it needs to be the thing that you go back to over and over and over again. And whether or not you use their site or not, World Anvil has just added a meta section to their world building, that these are questions that every world builder should ask themselves. And they're the questions right here. What's your inspirations? What genre are you doing? What tropes are you wanting to bring in here? What tropes are you wanting to ignore? Making sure that you have those questions up front are so vitally important. So, for example, with my work that I'm doing, like I already said, it's got a bubble goth aesthetic. That I can say that as a very quick shorthand. A lot of people might not know what that means, right? But so it's going to be kind of cutesy, creepy, with a lot of dark gloom and doom elements to it. Yeah. And so I know that right out the bat. So everything that I make should fit into that aesthetic, so that they look like they fit together. So all the parts click together. I know the audience that I'm going for. I know who they are. They're the people that I've been writing to, which is a really nice thing to have, but also the audience that I've seen my work growing into. And so we've read everything fantasy, and we're tired of elves.
Yeah.
We're just tired of elves. Everything has elves. I love your elves. I love elves. Don't get me wrong. Elves.
Everyone loves elves, but enough already.
So start looking for those fatigue points, because that's where you can stand out, right? So every one of the main species in my series is unique. I created them from scratch. They're not analogs. They're not, well, this is the elf of my setting, because I see a lot of that. Yeah. And every fantasy reader will see right through that.
Yeah. It's like, okay, you're calling them something else, but it's still an elf.
It's still an elf. So look for those fatigue points when you're doing this know your genre thing, because that's where you can really stand out. What are people just like, oh, please, can we give this one thing a rest? And you don't have to look very hard. Find the subreddit dedicated to your genre, and the top 5 posts are probably going to be people complaining about those things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not hard to find what they are, and really know the tropes, because the most important thing I can say about this one is know your genre, know the tropes that go with it, because you can't break a rule if you don't understand it.
Yeah, there's that old adage of learn the rules first, master the rules first, so that then you know how and when to break them.
There's a difference between a jazz musician and a toddler randomly hitting an instrument. Right. The toddler has no idea what they're doing. They're just hitting everything randomly. There's a lot of music theory behind jazz, so that they know why they're not playing certain sounds, why they're playing them in the order that they are.
Yeah.
You have to know the rules before you break them. So study your genre, know it inside and out, or it will look like you're making mistakes. Your intentional decisions will look like mistakes if you're not careful about how you put them in there. Experience.
Very nice. Very nice. All right. I'm going to go ahead and throw up the second one up here. Yes. Visuals and templates. She, and I agree, recommends visuals to help you along your world building, and to not shy away from using templates if you need them. Now, you earlier brought up World Anvil. World Anvil is one of the many world building things that I have tried. Now, I can't honestly say that I gave it as hard of a try as others might have. But I went into World Anvil and I was overwhelmed. There is so much. in
Yeah, it's a
that
fairly mature system. Yeah.
platform. Oh my God. Like, especially if you don't have an RPG background, like myself, I've never in my life played a single RPG game. So I mean, the closest I've gotten to is video games like World of Warcraft that are, like
Right.
that. But still, it's not the same. Like playing D&D is not the same as World of Warcraft. That's a whole other thing. So not having that and going into World Anvil, I felt like I was stepping into a hurricane. It felt like Twitter. It felt like walking into Twitter and just going, what is happening? What's going on right now? So um, I want to talk a little bit about your process, visuals, templates, and things like World Anvil. What do you got?
Okay, so for visuals, I want to say this very, very clearly. Make mood boards. Make mood
Mm,
boards. I really like to make music video playlists, especially with AMVs or other such things where they take a song that is genre appropriate for my story and cut up a show that is aesthetically similar to be the video on them. I love those because again, when you're trying to stay into an aesthetic, when you're trying to stay in a certain way of visualizing your work, it's beautiful. It really helps to have those on in the background. Even if you have them on mute, if the music isn't vibing with you, you can just have the playlist playing in the background so that you have those images. Find artists that vibe with you. Make inspiration boards anywhere and everywhere that you can, because it really will help you out a lot.
yeah.
And
Yeah, mood boards, vision boards, absolutely. And then, of course, you can go from there to the whole index card thing and having these pieces that you can move around and
yes,
interact with. And, if you don't have the space necessarily for the real index cards and the real boards and everything, there's digital versions that you can use. Milanote is the newest thing that I'm hearing about, and I just started trying this week, where they have like basically little like index card things that you can move around and interact with, and I find that very beneficial in the visual aspect, just being able to see
yes.
everything. Now,
I
what about maps?
Okay, so for me, there's two kinds of maps that I do. One is the map that I make in Scapple, which is it's the mind mapping tool from Literature and Latte, who make Scrivener. But basically, anything that lets you do mind maps, you can do the similar thing where it's
Okay.
just words in general location. So that I have, because when I first start thinking of things, it's often not visual. It's just, oh, up the street and to the right is this place or
Right.
something like that. And with a mind map tool, I have started most of the maps of my cities using those because I have an idea of where the words are and I don't have to worry about the images. I don't have to care about what it looks like. I can just slap them down.
Yeah.
I've been playing with a lot of stuff for maps, and this really goes into how much you want to do.
Hmm.
Um, Both Project Eos and Dungeon Fog are probably going to be the most accessible tools, or Incarnate. I did not have a good experience with Incarnate, but it's very similar to the two. I know other people that really, really love it. And that's Incarnate with a K,
Okay.
because metal. Um, oh, they have a very like metal font for everything that they do.
That's actually
And
something I'm seeing a lot across world building stuff. Is I'm
yeah,
seeing a lot of real like metalheads.
yeah, there's a lot of us in here. Those are tile-based world builders. So you literally pick the tiles that you want and you just plop them into place, and they're really easy
Oh,
to
okay,
build
cool.
a world with. They're kind of the simplest way in
I
to
was
a
gonna say
lot of
because
the.
World Anvil, when I went into their map setup, like I couldn't find a map generator of any kind. You had to
Yeah,
already bring
yeah, you
artwork
have to
already
bring an
made.
image with you. So I personally use, depending on the how much time I want to spend working on something, and or whether or not it's going to be public facing, and whether or not it's appropriate to the project. I love Worldographer, and I love Worldographer, and I love Wonder Draft.
Okay.
And these are two very different products. Worldographer is made for making hex-based maps like you used to get with old games. It's very simple. It's tile-based. You just plunk your tiles down into the hexes and you can build your entire world up. It has generators built into it. So if you just need a random continent or set of islands, it can plop a set out for you real quickly. It even, with the add-ons, it even has cities, towns, and dungeons that it can do. It's
That's
really
cool.
quick. It's really easy. It's very old school looking. Like I joke around with my friends that it's like it looks like Blue Box D&D. It looks like something out of the 80s. It's going to make a certain aesthetic style map. And which is fine if that's what you're going for, or if that will work for your project, or if you just need to know where things are. Because again, I try to think about whether or not I'm building publicly or privately on things. The other Wonderdraft makes beautiful maps. I mean, stone cold beautiful maps. Now it has a lot of tile-based stuff as well, where you can drag and drop. Like, here are mountains, so you just pick their mountain tool, and then
see, that's what I'm looking for. That's what I was hoping for when I went into World Anvil, and was disappointed that I didn't find exactly that, like with the, at least not with the generator.
And then the nice thing about Wonderdraft is once you have the map done, you can actually apply either one of the built-in aesthetics to it. So if you want it to look like a paper map, if you want it to look like a world map,
oh, that's nice.
if and it will just automatically change all the colors for you, or you can go in and independently change them to make it look like exactly what you want. So if you really want a beautiful map and you're willing to invest the time in,
service?
Wonderdraft is a paid service. They're available through Humble Bundle. I can never say that phrase. I don't. It's caught in my mouth.
Humble Bundle.
Yeah, Humble Bundle.
That's a tongue twister.
Or through their website, which I think just directs you to the Humble Bundle page. But they're really good. They are also accessible anywhere because they have a Linux, Mac, and Windows version. So literally whatever you're running, they will run on your computer. So I will say that the Mac version, because that's what I run on my old computer, ran a little hot. So I had to turn it off and back and let my laptop rest every now and then. Which I don't have that problem on the Windows when I used it on a Windows computer. My newer Mac doesn't care. Like it's fine. So it may have just been something about my like 9-year-old Mac that I was trying to use the software on, struggling to use it.
Yeah, it's weird how that's actually what's funny is I still have an iPad 2. Like it's the first one that they made that was like, ooh, look how thin it is, and now you look at it and it's a brick. And it still works. I still use it, but it's at a point now where I can't even update the software anymore because the hardware is just so dated that it won't even support. It's just funny how that happens.
I've started playing with a new thing. If you don't want to draw your map at all,
that's me. I'm a terrible artist. I don't want to draw it. I want a thing that's going to help me to create it, from
I'm going to drop a link into the private chat if you want to share it, or just so you have it. It's called Asgar, and
I've seen this. I think I went in and played with it a little bit.
You can download it. They have a downloadable version that you can download and play with that way, or you can run it off of the website. Either way, you still have to share. You still have to save your work locally.
But that's the one that it's a literal like random generator, right?
It's literally
so you have a world that looks like what you want it to look like.
Yeah, and it will do a lot of really fun things. Like you can tell it how many countries are supposed to be in this on this map, and it will randomly generate borders for you. You can tell it how many cities, and it will place them. But the other really cool thing is you can edit it. And that's where the power comes in. Like you can go back in and you can change the names of things to whatever they are in your world. You don't have to rely
colors and all that
on their stuff. You can also select the shapes that it made and edit them. So if they're not exactly the way you want them to look, you can edit the colors, you can edit the shapes. There's a lot of stuff that you can do with them. But I've been playing with that recently, and that's really cool. If you're doing sci-fi, because science fiction is a thing. It is a thing. It is a thing. And I love.
Let me tell you the problem I ran into in writing my sci-fi world novel. When it came time to world building, I realized that I had shot myself in the foot because I do have a planet in my story, and we will, explore that in more depth in book 2. But book 1 takes place on the Spark, which is this moon-sized space station that goes around that planet, right? It revolves around that planet. Now, this place looks like what you would imagine a spark, like frozen in time, would look like, or an asterisk, a 3-dimensional asterisk, right? With like protrusions in all directions, right? And each one of those is essentially a country full of cities and skylines all around, like every angle of it. And so I can't make a map for this thing. Like I have made one for me, but there is no map generator anywhere that's going to map a 3-dimensional asterisk for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
that's get out Blender and that way.
And I'm like, the one thing that I know for a fact I cannot do is I cannot draw. I'm terrible at drawing, therefore drawing maps. And I create a thing that no one else could possibly draw but me.
I will say that my know your stuff with science fiction, because people will question you.
Oh yeah.
I've got a sci-fi project in the background, and when I talked about one of the species I was going to be working on, I immediately got like DMs from people going, a species like that could never evolve on a planet like that. And I literally was trading.
It's called fiction, man.
I was literally trading papers with them because I had receipts, because I knew that was coming, and I had receipts that I could bring from astrophysical journals. So just be prepared for that. But to make sure that you really don't anger them, I just shared another link in the private chat to tectonics.js.
Okay.
This will generate a supercontinent that tectonics will rip apart. And you can play with time and move it to exactly the way that you want. If you give it long enough, they'll start crashing into each other again and making mountains. It will tell you where it will use the Coriolis effect to generate climates on the map for you. It will tell you where your subduction zones are and everything. It is beautiful. It is currently free.
Get out.
Yeah. So if you really want to know everything, you cannot load a seed world into this. So you really have to work with what it gives you. I mean, you can generate different ones, but if you already know what you want your world to look like, I don't know of a way to use this to make that come to pass. So, make sure you know that going in.
I'm going to check that out.
It's really neat to see, because you can pick, like I said, you can pick your areas and you can just play with this. It's got a slider for time, and you can watch the continents go across. You can see them merging back again. It's really neat, and we'll give you.
Have you heard of that video game No Man's Sky?
Yes.
That's what this sounds like to me on a smaller scale. Is the idea of like typing in all of the laws of a universe and then hitting go and just Big Bang creating a universe from scratch and just seeing what happens.
Yeah, kind of, because you do have control over, like, you can set what percentage of the surface is water, what percentage of the surface is land. When you get into some of the overlays that you can edit like where the climate lines are. So if you're just generating a small portion of the planet, so it's just in the tropics, you can cut out the Arctic zones from it and just keep it in the temperature zone that you want. They've got a lot of really cool features over there. And like I said, insanely, it is currently free.
That's insane. I can't wait to check it out. I'm going to do it.
Yeah, it's a great tool for anybody who wants a more realistic world, I don't think the maps that it generates are all that pretty, but you could always load them into WonderDraft, use their Sea Rise with about a 2 chaos on the brush and trace it, and it will give you a nice, more realistic looking coastline and whatnot, if that's what you want. I do that with a lot of things where I'll use a generator to help me get things
right, and then move it over and perfect it.
And then perfect it in WonderDraft, because WonderDraft's where things go to become pretty.
Right on. Well, all of this,
it's a great tool.
All of this kind of ties in with the third one that I want to talk about, which is having a world building hub, you know, this location, this one place where everything kind of comes together. We've been talking about all these different, you know, engines online that you can use to generate maps, and, you know, things like World Anvil that will help you, you know, develop the culture and the politics and the religions and all that kind of stuff. Tectonic sounds awesome, like all of these things, but to have a hub where it all sort of comes together and coalesces.
I would also say this should start wherever you draft. So I started working on this project using Plotter, which I had not used that much previously. I kind of didn't like it for the last project I tried to use it for, but it's working quite well with this one. And what's nice about it is it has the series Bible stuff built into it. So when I'm working on my outline and I name a plant or something, I can flip over and put them into one of the categories I set up in the character thing, because you can set up types of characters. So I actually have a type of character that's called creatures. And so I can put what I know about them in there for now, and I have it as a good marker to remember to go back and rebuild and build them later. Make sure that you're keeping notes on what you need to build, because even if you think you've built everything, in the heat of the moment, your mind will be like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if? And you need to make sure that that's built out and works and it's functional and everything, and bring it back in. So that can be really easy. I'd used Story Planner for that a lot previously, and that's a free app on most devices. They do have a paid version which allows it to sync between all of your devices, which is really nice, because I would type a note out on the deck on my phone, and when I got back to my laptop, it was there. I didn't have to worry about copying anything over. That's a nice feature.
Technology, man.
Yeah, that was such a nice feature. But I do believe the basic unit for Story Planner is free. But have something like that where you can collect your ideas first, and then have the place that they will live when they're finished. Because a lot of those ideas will end up getting pruned and killed, and you don't want them cluttering your actual setting Bible. So if you're wanting to do it all in one app like Scrivener, make sure you have a folder for incoming ideas. And nothing leaves there until you know it actually is going to exist in the setting, and it gets put wherever, in whatever folder that you want it to be in. It
organization.
Really, yeah, it really helps out a lot.
For
also,
sure.
Have a schema that you want to use and try to have that in mind when you're going into it. I have over on the bookshelf over there old copies of like the CIA World Book and whatnot, and of course my various role-playing games and stuff that I've used for examples of how I want to organize my world building. And those are really handy to give you a sense of structure, because I cannot say this enough. Structure is the most important thing you can build for yourself when you're building a world. That way, when you need to figure out what did you call that mouse that is living in the doorway, it's a specific kind of mouse that you created just for the setting. You don't spend 12 hours flipping through all the things that you
Yeah, for sure.
Set those schemas up and run with them. I love World Anvil. I use it for everything, but I understand.
Yeah, so many people swear by it, which is why I want to give it an honest try. I really do. I feel like I need like a seminar or something, like somebody to sit me down and be like, look, this is how it works.
Yeah, I've actually thought about doing that. Actually, the last time I thought about doing that, Janet from World Anvil did actually a video about that. I was like, oh, good, I don't have to anymore. I still might need to do something like that more for the AuthorTube community because she was very broad. They do have starter lists now for if you're a writer or whatnot, and that are very handy. So
So
I
kind of a
really,
little like step by step
yeah,
sort of
yeah,
thing.
how to use stuff, because the best thing about their templates is, one, you don't have to use them. They have a general article that you can just use for everything. I use a lot of their templates just because it keeps me from forgetting to do some things. But I don't always fill out every box. That's the other thing. Anytime you're using a world building platform that comes
Yes.
with templates, you don't have to fill every box. It
Don't
may
get
not
carried away
make
with it.
sense.
If it doesn't directly relate to your story, if it doesn't relate to the plot, in other words, world building should build off of your story, not
Yes.
the other way around. Something that I very commonly see is people talking about, like, I put so many years into developing this world and all of its languages or whatever magic systems, but now I don't have a story to go with it. And I'm like, the story comes first. The world should build off of the story, not the other way around.
You know, like I said, I'm doing an open world project right now because I want there to be a tabletop role playing game that,
Yes, that's a very
as I always say,
specific
be
goal.
better
Yeah.
than me. Because when I started this project, I named 52 countries, I made 52 flags and 52 official crests for each. I know what their flag looks like. I know what their national colors are. I know what the mottos are for most of these countries. We will meet probably 2 or 3 of them in the first set of books. But I'm if I were just writing this 5.5 book series, that would have been such a waste of time, energy,
Yeah.
and effort. I mean, it was fun. I enjoy doing it. I love world building, but most people are never going to meet any of those other peoples that I spent
Yeah.
time making.
I love how we're organically going through the list here because this all relates to the next one, which is so building as you go and reading the room. In other words, as you're writing and you're discovering, oh, here's world building stuff that I need to do, you can go ahead and do that to infuse into your story. We've been talking a lot about designing these worlds and coming up with the world building, and there should be a lot of that done ahead of time. But again, knowing your genre, knowing your audience, tailoring the amount of world building to what kind of story you're telling, and then get started writing the story.
Yeah.
And as you're writing that story and you're finding more things that need to be infused into the world building, you can do that, go as you go. But the other half of that is reading the room, which is more what I want to talk about, because you should be able, when you're editing, when you're rereading your own story, realizing when you're getting lost in it. You know what I mean? When you're tackling every little detail of every little thing that doesn't actually influence your story at all. So reading the room and building as you go.
I love that you said that. I was in the Spotify collab sessions this week, and the senior marketing director for Def Jam Records, in his talk on data, started with F data. Data doesn't matter. Learn to read the room. That's how he opened his talk. And it was such a shock to everybody in there, because like we showed up to figure out how to read analytics and understand how the numbers work. And he's just like, it's about the room and seeing what people are vibing to. And this is so important. If you are wanting to be a writer and you don't already have a platform set up, do it. Whatever it is, whatever's comfortable for you. You don't have to be on YouTube. If you love making Instagram content or TikTok or whatever, that's your platform. But that's also where you can start doing that, feeling the room. Like when I decided that I wanted the story to have that kind of bubble goth aesthetic, I started telling jokes about it on my stream. Like, wouldn't it be funny if this critter existed? And watched the people just like fall in love with some of those ideas. And it's like, okay, this is the right way to go. Like, and it's become kind of the joke of like the setting I'm currently building is, can I go too far enough? Like, it's trying to find that fresh thing, but have that place where you can, within reason, sound off of other people that are fans of the genre that you are working in and know what you're doing. Because you'll know if the story works. Like,
Yeah.
I sent the outline to one of my critique partners and immediately got and this is going to be done when? Like, not I liked it, not, oh, this needs to be tweaked. Those eventually came, like, here's some things that need to be fixed in it. It wasn't like, oh, I created like the greatest thing ever. It was the first thing I heard back was, and this will be, I'll be able to read the finished version when.
Yeah.
And that's like, yes, okay, I hit the beats I needed to hit. This is hitting the right note. Like, they're a very big fan of this genre. And to have them be like, yes,
let's go.
And
like, where is it?
Right. Like, where is it? Like, read the room. That I can't overemphasize that, because we want to keep it to all of our ideas so close to our chest. And one, it's a different world and you need to be open. Like, if you're not making fans now, it's going to be so hard to make fans later. And you're going to be so much more defeated by it. The more people that you can have waiting for that first book to come out, the more books book's going to sell.
Yeah.
And the less defeated you're going to be when that first book comes out and nobody buys it because nobody knows who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the whole point of all this, like the author platform, the channel that I'm doing, like building a community, an audience of people who are going to be excited for this thing that I'm working so hard on for so long, so that when it's done, somebody's actually waiting for it to buy it.
Because I hate to say it, because I always feel like I'm bragging, but like I didn't do anything special. Like, when my last book came out, when The Chain came out, I was able to move 1,000 copies in a week. Not because I'm special or the idea was so great. It's I had spent up to that point like 7 years building an audience of people that were like, oh wait, this is that weird gothic fiction story that you were talking about that takes place in Maryland. Oh crap, bam. And they pounced on it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not overnight success. Is not overnight success. It's that those years and years and years. And don't be complacent with it either. Like, I don't know what this book's going to do when it comes out, right?
Yeah.
It could sell a bunch right out the gate, or people could be like, I thought you were going to be writing about witches and vampires in Maryland. Not be interested. You never know. But yeah, don't be complacent.
Orla has a question here. How do you decide what software or system to use for what project?
I am very hippy dippy about this, and it's whatever's vibing with me at the time.
Same.
When I started the Crypts and Wyverns books I'm writing right now, nothing was working. Like, it just felt like every bit of software, even the journal I was using at the time, it felt wrong and it felt grating against me. And so, like, I had loaded up Wavemaker again because, well, maybe this is the project I can use Wavemaker for. And no, it just doesn't feel right. And when I loaded up Plotter, I don't know why. And it was the good fortune that they just did a major feature update to it, so that it was like a great convergence of things, that they basically added all of the features I needed right before I reinstalled it. And it just felt right.
It's lucky.
Yeah. Know what your needs are. I mean, that to me is the most important thing that we as authors are terrible at, is what do you need? Do you need something that will be give you organizational support and assistance? Do you need something that will give you a visual way to look at and map out your story? Do you need something that will kind of take you by the hand and guide you through? That's one of the things I think World Anvil is really good for, is if you don't know where to start creating a fantasy civilization, click New Species, click over to the Sentient tab, and there's all the questions right there. Just start at the beginning, fill it out, and you will have created a fantasy race or a sci-fi race or whatever by the time you're done filling that out.
Yeah.
Right. So
templates, like we said earlier. Like, if you don't know what you're doing, just rely on those who do.
and start figuring out what it is that you need. Like where are you having problems? Like this story, because it has so many moving parts. There are, I think over the course of the 5 books, there's, I think, seven or 9, depending on what 2 I'm debating, if they're going to be POVs or not, but there's going to be 7 or 9 points of view throughout the 5.5 books. And there's so many other things going on in the background. I needed a visual way that I could load up and see my story. That I needed to be able to just glance through it very easily and be able to scroll back and forth in timeline and see what I was doing. And Aeon Timeline was too powerful. I was getting feature paralysis because there were too many things I could fill out for it because I don't know the exact dates. Right. And it was feeling that out. Like once I knew what I needed, and I didn't want to have a giant murder board on the wall behind me because it probably would take up the entire wall to get all of the cards up, I started looking for things that I could build that in and finding out which one worked. But yeah, feel if you're finding your current software painful, it's the wrong software.
And yeah, hopefully it should make it easier.
Yeah. These are tools.
Yeah, I agree. Depending on the project, depending on the world, depending on your needs for each one, a different way might be the way to go for each one. I mean, like I said, I'm trying Milano for the first time now, and they have a map generator too. I haven't played with it yet, but there is one in there, and so it has all these little facets that make it a really good hub, like we were talking earlier, to have everything in one place. But if I need a good map generator, I'm going to go over there and I'm going to use what I need from whatever other map generator is going to best suit my project. And then, as we said earlier, bring it back over and perfect it and bring it all together. So,
and if you and experiment, if you don't know if you need a map, go to donjon.com. I think it's donjon.com, DONJON. Just search DONJON. City builder or anything that you might want a random map on. They're not the most detailed, they're not the prettiest, they're just quick and dirty. Like answer 5 questions, hit generate, bam, there's a quick and dirty map. See if that you look at that and go, oh, wait a minute, so that means, see if that makes you feel better. Like see if that actually helps. If it does, maybe invest some time in making maps. If you look at that and you're like, I am so much more lost than I was before, you don't need a map. Make a list, make a to-do list. I had a friend who on the back end of her WordPress site actually built like a choose your own adventure for one of the houses that was in, where she linked each page to the other rooms in the house so that she could literally do a walkthrough just clicking through. So the page was just the description of the room, the title was what the room was, and the links were basically what hallways, corridors, or doors linked off from it. And use that because that helped her get into the world that she was writing and understand the place the story took place.
Nice.
There's a tool out there. You just know what your needs are.
Yeah.
And I still think she should have released that as like a choose your own adventure walkthrough that we could have done.
I used to love those as a kid, man. Those Goosebump books, the Choose Your Own Adventure Goosebump books. I used to read the heck out of those. I love them. Tom has good advice for me, it looks like. If each country is a cylinder connected at one end, I could map the countries on a sphere, with each country being a hexagon or a circle, with a C on each non-country area. It's interesting. I'll play around with that. Sounds like it could work.
That is an interesting thing. That could work.
Clever Tom. I like it.
Yeah, Tom's good for stuff like that. Tom has the solutions.
Yeah, I like it. Coming with the ideas. Next up, I wanted to talk about taking ownership. Here's something that irks the hell out of me when I read a fantasy story or something written in the last 5 to 10 years, reasonably, recently enough, where we don't put up with some of this nonsense from the old books that we used to. So when folks will create a medieval story or whatever, and every character is white, or there's just no difference. They're all straight, and there's all this talk about, well, it's historically accurate. Okay, first of all, no, it's not. And secondly, it's fiction. Fiction you wrote, and you should take ownership over the world that you're creating and the rules that you're creating into it. I'm creating a fictional place that does not exist. I can do anything I want in it. And I should do what's best for the story. And if in the example of my own book, the last of humanity is living on the Spark, on this moon-sized space station. And if the last of humanity is there, the ones who fled from Earth before it was destroyed, it's going to be a diverse bunch of people. It's going to be a diverse group. It just makes sense that would be the case. So it would be disingenuous of me to write anything otherwise. And I have to take ownership over the world I'm creating and the rules that I'm putting into it and the characters that I'm creating into it. So that's something I wanted to talk about, is taking ownership of your world building.
N.K. Jemisin on her blog has a wonderful post on world building and she's got a PDF to download with like worksheets to fill out on this. Like, understand that, there should be some cultural struggle and some strife between the peoples in your setting, but they should make sense in your setting. Like, we have these weird color lines in our world because that's how we chose to define things. Like, if you go back in history, Romans didn't care what color your skin was. They only cared if you had citizenship or not. That's the line that they drew in the sand. Like, anybody who earned citizenship or was born with citizenship was a citizen. They didn't, the law didn't care. The people didn't care. There were African emperors of Rome. Like, they just didn't care, right? Because that's not where they drew their lines. It was either you were Roman or you were other. That's how they saw things. And the idea of Roman, what was Roman, expanded over course of the empire. So there's going to be strife, there's going to be conflicts, but they need to make sense. Importing, and okay, I've done like 12 episodes about this on my various podcasts. So if you want to hear me go on ad nauseum,
plug the podcast, because it is a world building podcast, right?
Yeah, my podcast, Project Shadow, and Myth Weaving, which is where I talk about world building and whatnot. I've talked about this a lot because it's one of my big pet peeves. Don't make an analogy if you don't have to. This is how you get misunderstood and turn yourself into the villain. If you want to talk about race relations in America, write a story that takes place in America. If you're going to analogize it, you're going to face really serious trouble. And you can see this with works like The Handmaid's Tale, right? She wanted to talk about certain feminist issues when she wrote those books. And to do so, the book literally begins with, and they did a genocide and got rid of everyone who wasn't white. That's like, sorry, spoilers if you haven't read like what is that, 50-year-old book?
Yeah,
it's been around for a while, but like, that's how it starts, because she doesn't want to have to deal with race and class and any of these other issues. She had very specific things that she wanted to go for. And so the book basically just starts with, and when Gilead was formed, they basically did a genocide and everybody else is gone. So here, let's get into our story. And you read that and you just kind of go, wait, what? Like, because it's just like this offhand comment at the beginning where you're learning about the setting. And like, how are we not talking about, like, they did what now?
Yeah. How are we just glossing over this?
So all the people of color are out in the nuclear wastelands on the borders of Gilead. Okay. And it makes it's really jarring when you read it. And that may be a good thing, that may be a bad thing, depending on how you get into that book. But she wanted to analogize everything, and she had her pet issue. And you see this so often where we make those analogies and they just fall apart. If you want to talk about a thing, talk about a thing. If you want to do any kind of analogy, you have to build it from the ground up. You have to understand where in your setting that turmoil comes from. You know, I always use like Star Trek The Next Generation as my example for this. Like I love Star Trek. Like Star Trek's like one of my favorite things in the universe. Every time they're like, let's do an analogy about sexuality. Oh, please don't. Please don't. We're going to analogize this racial conflict. Please don't. Those are the episodes that you're just kind of like, oh yeah, this one. When
Let's
you
just
get
get through this one.
Yeah, like, because people can tell if you're either being disingenuous or if they feel like you're being disingenuous.
If you're trying too hard, if you're reaching,
yeah, or if you're trying too hard. This is the problem that Supergirl got into, hitting really hard in about season 3, is it analogized a lot of issues it wanted to talk about, and those analogies weren't always perfect, and it got really, even like when you agree, whether you agree with it or not is not the issue. It's just, it's especially for some of those, like they were issues I agreed with, but let's not talk about it that way. Not. So bear that in mind. Like, you will have strife. Strife is a part of your stories, unless you're writing. There are very few genres that don't include that at its heart.
Right.
But don't put something in just because it's expected. Like that's where you need to interrogate yourself. If you think, well, people have always been misogynistic, so we need to put that in there.
You don't need to. Maybe your culture, that's a very rare thing. You know?
Yeah, we know for a fact that there were and still are around the world many matriarchal societies that are. There's one group I can never remember their name, and anytime I talk about them, and then like as soon as I go off the air, I'm like, oh yeah, blah. In China, it's a matriarchal society, and it's basically everything we think of as our American patriarchy, but backwards. Like the men do not live with the women. The women have say over everything, and it's the exact opposite. There are other cultures that are very equal and even, and we have a big problem.
And that's kind of the point of world building, right? Is like creating different cultures in this fictional world that you're creating, having them actually differ from each other in significant ways, you know. And that's that particular facet of society is one that I want to see explored more openly than it usually is.
Yeah. One of my teachers had this wonderful phrase where he would say, we need to stop foreverizing all of our problems. And we as writers really need to be checking all of our assumptions at the door, especially when we're doing world building, because we as a human species have this idea of, well, everybody eats with a fork, a spoon, and a knife. Well, one, around the world, not true. Two, historically, not true. Like, we've had different implements, but because it's how we do it now in our little neck of the woods, we assume that's the way it has always been for all time. And we foreverize so many things that we do say and believe. And if you really want to do some powerful world building, try to throw out as many of those preconceptions going into it. Every time you put something in, ask why. Why is the most powerful tool we as writers have, and especially as world builders? Why is it this way? Why does the species have horns? Is it because they look cool? That might be enough for your setting, but maybe you need more than that. Why? Why? Ask why all the time.
I had to share this.
That's true. That's very true. Also, like, we have the jaws that we have because our ancestors cooked their food.
What?
Like, you can, in all members of the Homo genus prior to finding fire pits had really thick I mean thick mandibles with very large chomping teeth, much more like gorillas. And you start finding fire pits, and all the skulls that you find, the mandible shrinks and gets more dainty, and we start developing chins, which we didn't have previously because we had more gorilla, more gorilla type faces. And so if you go back, probably 150,000 years, we weren't cooking with fire as much, and we had much more brutish appearances because we had to be able to have these giant muscles to chew through all of the raw food.
Tough raw meat. Yeah.
And we foreverize so much that we don't even think of what was it like when we had fire. And also don't think that technology has to always arise in the same order. If I can,
that's a good point.
Remember, they had coin-operated vending machines in ancient Greece.
I did not know this.
That existed. They were based off of weights and pulleys. You would put a coin in, especially a lot of temples had them for holy water dispensers. You would go in, you would put your coin in, and it would dispense a set amount of holy water into a vessel for you.
This is blowing my mind.
Right? They had steam engines in ancient Greece. They used them for automatic door openers, which is part of the magic that people would have. They would go to the temple, the priestess would invoke the gods, steam would come out, and the doors would open. These giant doors on the temple would open. They had these things, but they didn't see using them in the way that we ended up using them. Nobody thought, hey, what if we use this to make an automobile or anything like that? And then, we stopped worshipping the gods that used those in their temples, and the technology went away. Because that was its use.
Back in another form later on.
It was a door opener, right?
That's so crazy.
So
that's interesting because I play a lot of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and in that game, there is ancient technology that you can find that is far more advanced than the weaponry that they have in the present day of the game, and I find that so brilliant and interesting. This idea that there was an advanced civilization far in the past that created these incredible advanced weapons, and that civilization has died out, and nobody's creating that technology anymore. If you find it, it's considered ancient, but it's futuristic technology. That's a beautiful piece of world building right there.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing that, when you actually get into the way things actually worked, Rome had running water. Rome had hot and cold running water.
I did know that.
They had a sewer system. These were things that were lost in the Middle Ages because they rejected all things Roman.
So crazy. And it makes sense. They're rebelling essentially against their oppressors. It makes sense. But that's so interesting. Literally rejecting advancements in technology.
And so these are the things to bear in mind. Who knows what would be invented first? It's one of the things that I think when you see somebody who really thinks about it and they do a steampunk type setting, we could have had steampunk in the Middle Ages. You never know. We know that there were some experiments with hot air done in 500 BC, but nobody thought to actually make a hot air balloon. What if one person would have thought to make a hot air balloon in 500 BC? The whole world would be different. So just don't get caught up in this is the way technology would have naturally progressed, because it's how it happened for us.
Right. And you know what? That brings us perfectly to the final point, which is connecting the dots and knowing when to stop. Connecting the dots refers to the idea of not giving the reader everything. Not every single little tiny detail. Think of it more as a connect the dot image, where you are giving them all of the dots and you are letting them create the image in their mind. So that goes hand in hand with knowing when to stop, knowing when the world building is enough for the story that you're telling, and not going beyond that and going overboard. I love to bring up George R.R. Martin, who in turn is influenced by Tolkien. And you can say the same about both, that they are very, very detailed in their descriptions, visually, and all aspects of their world building. I would say that George Martin shows more restraint than Tolkien did. but even he gets lost sometimes. Like, you know, those feast scenes that he does in his books where he's telling you every single piece of food on the table. And I'm like, dude, what's Ned Stark doing? Like, why am I reading about blood oranges? You know, and so know when to stop, know when to rein it in just a little bit. Give the reader the dots for them to connect and create the full picture in your head. What are your thoughts on this?
So first of all, my one of my like catchphrases every time I start writing is I always start with "I am not writing Gormenghast," which if you've never read this book, like you know what the mice are doing in the walls as they're walking down the hallways. Like
Oh my God.
every like I could
No.
probably close my eyes and draw from memory the filigrees around the keyholes in this castle. It is such a richly detailed world. Like you know everything, and so I will
But you
very
don't
often
need to.
don't need to. I will very often start my writing day with, and today I am not writing Gormenghast, and go to start doing some things.
Yeah.
So
See, I'm a very visual storyteller. I like painting a beautiful word picture for people to have in their mind. But I also am very weary of not overdoing it. I like giving them just enough to like know, okay, we're inside this car. I know what the inside of a car looks like. I can fill in the blanks. You know, I don't need to give you every detail about it. Um, that's that's the kind of world building that I'm coming from. You know,
okay,
like the idea of this sort of bare bones of what you need to get the point across for the story.
yeah, I started laughing because I wondered when I would be fighting off my instinct to quote dead French philosophers, and this is that moment where I'm just going to let myself do it. Uh, Over on the Myth Weaving podcast, I did quite a few episodes about Roland Barthes' ideas of how stories are constructed. And don't read Barth. Don't. Like, if you really like very dense philosophical treatises, have fun with that. But find somebody, like, go listen. It's free. I simplified it. But he talks about two kinds of books. And I find this very, especially as a world builder, so powerful. He talks about what he calls writerly books and readerly books. A readerly book is a book where the author has taken so much time and care with the construction of the book that the reader is trapped and has to just accept what was written. And then he talks about writerly books that make the reader a co-conspirator with the author in the telling of the story. He, like me, prefers the latter, where
Sure.
you have enough that you're bringing the reader in. I love that experience when I'm reading a book and I can start theorizing about what's going on, or like, ooh, and go off on a tangent. Like you meet a new culture or what have you, and you run off and wonder about that. Like, I love that, like Anne McCaffrey for her Dragon Lovers guide over there included recipes for the things that are in the books. So if you want to taste the stews and various beverages, like it's right over there on the shelf. Like here's what the author thinks that they taste like. That's amazing. And you can have that experience. But I love being able to play with it. So I'm not going to go through all of his philosophy. Like I said, check out my podcast Myth Weaving, where I did a series on these. But he breaks it down into basically how you signal to the audience things that they will fill in automatically on their own, and how you can bring them in and make them ask the right questions, how to guide them to the questions that you want them asking, and have them be able to fill in parts of the story on for themselves. And he basically is giving a philosophy of here's how you guide your readers to create their own headcanon about your work. And I love that, because that to me is when you've succeeded as a writer, when you're talking to somebody who read one of your stories and you're like, I know you think this character is the villain, but, and they start bringing up like little things that they said or little actions that they took. And like, if you put these in context together, I think, you know, da 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 da. And you, that book had to mean something to them.
Yeah.
For them to take the time, energy, and effort to put those things together. And that's when you succeeded. When there's enough there that you can look at a villain in a book and see them as a person and not just evil dark lord twirling mustache to smash good person, right? There's it's a fine art of not giving away too much or spending way too much time. Like, seriously, if I have to watch one more movie or TV show where we get the tragic origin of the villain for like 30 minutes to an hour, yeah, I don't need all that. Like, I didn't need all that. Like in the Snyder cut of Justice League, I didn't need to know all of, Steppenwolf's tragic backstory. I didn't. That added nothing for me. Like, okay, fine, but like I know he's gonna die by the end of this because it's a superhero movie. So he's either gonna die or be in chains by the end. So
there's a lot to be said, especially with villains, about creating the mystery of their past. You know what I mean? Like, I understand that so many people who have trauma in their past inflict trauma on others later on. We all know this, but I feel like what you're talking about, writers tend to lean on that a little too hard, rely on that a little too much. When you watch The Dark Knight and Heath Ledger's Joker is giving everybody a different version of his origin story because he just loves messing with people like that, that's compelling.
Yeah.
And if Nolan had decided to do a flashback that showed us the true story, it would not have been,
it'd be boring,
as interesting as all of the pondering that you have to do on your own based on these lies that the Joker is telling you. And one of the things that I love about that movie in particular is all of the fan theories about the Joker's origins.
Yeah.
And most of them have nothing to do with the versions of the story that he told, because we know we can't trust anything he says. But he's dropped all these other little clues. He has expertise with explosives. He was able to fit in on the line with, the cops shooting guns, so he has military experience. And so people started extrapolating: is he an ex-soldier? Was he injured in a war? Is that where his scars come from? Is that where his appetite for anarchy comes from? And your imagination runs wild with it, and that's the kind of world building that I'm going for. Like you're saying, just like setting them up to go on their own fan theories and figure it out.
And this is kind of connects back to like the first thing that I said, where you can't break the rules if you don't know what they are. You may never tell your readers what the Joker's backstory was. You should know it.
Exactly.
Because if you don't, those hints are going to go nowhere. They're going to start conflicting with each other. They're going to stop making sense. And at a certain point, the audience will go, oh, they just didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, this doesn't make any sense. They didn't know what they were doing. And as soon as that thought crosses their minds, you have lost the suspension of disbelief. And you've lost them. Yeah. So whether or not you ever share it, like the series I'm writing starts with a calamity in chapter 1. A very bad, terrible, bad thing happens. I know everything that happened for about 100 years leading up to that event happening. I don't know how much of that the readers will ever see. Like, there are parts of it here and parts of it there. But the actual why is not important. It's the what now that's important. Story. But I need to know why it happened. So anytime a theory comes up, the characters can be as wrong as the characters want to be, but any evidence that shows up in the story needs to be consistent with what actually happened. So maybe readers can put together what's actually going on and all of the other stuff. But as with all things, you have to know your rules before you break them. And that goes even for, I'm going to have a character with a mysterious background. Sad thing for us writers, it's not always best for us to live in that mystery because it can make us look like fools later. And I could think of at least 5 books off the top of my head that at a certain point they're like, oh, I need to actually answer that now because it's important to the plot. And you get there and you're like, or just something that happened not that long ago. Oh, so Dumbledore had a secret brother that you've known about all along, apparently. How does this help me at all? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
Especially because we got images of him and his brother arguing about their sister. Wouldn't they bring up secret brother at some point in one of those arguments? Like, we get flashbacks of that, wouldn't we? Okay, fine. Like, you need to know. Because even if she did, like, she claims that she's known this since she first started writing the books, that there was a secret brother, whatever. But you can't just throw that at people. It's so
if she knew it from the beginning, there would be something in the writing, like
one of those biographies.
So in my first chapter, in the prologue of my book, we're following the point of view of a character who is stepping into a whole new like world, so to speak. Like, she has very little idea what's going on, but she does have some historical knowledge of where she's living on the Spark here. And so she encounters at this person's house what I based off of a bonsai tree, a little potted tree with a windy trunk, and I changed it and I made it like this sort of like fantasy world little tree. And she's never seen anything like it. She has no idea what this tree is. And all she knows from the person who lives here is that this little guy is over 300 years old. And so the character pieces together, this must be from the planet Gaia that no one has set foot on in over 300 years. And that is enough for me as the writer. That's enough for that chapter. I move on from there because now the reader is thinking about, like, why hasn't anyone been back there in 300 years? What happened 300 years ago? Why is this thing here then? Why hasn't it died in so long? Like, all these questions just start rattling off, and it's all stuff that I'll eventually get to, at least in part, if not in full. But I know what all that stuff leads to. I know where it all comes from, and it's all stuff that I'm planting. Like, you have to plant it if it's going to matter later.
And also, anybody who thinks that I'm saying that you definitely have to know, you at least have to know what is possible for the characters to discover. So if your Machiavellian villain was so good that they would only ever figure out that this other person was responsible, you need to at least be consistent in that. But yeah, connect all your dots, cross all your T's, dot all your I's.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have to know everything from the ground up, and that can be daunting when you're going in.
The old little did he know.
Yeah. And just it is the biggest trope that just gets me. Like, it's one thing if you've set it up, because there have been a few times I've seen the reveal and it's worked for me, but did you know they had a secret twin? Like, like that secret twin, secret brother.
Nothing infuriates me more than secret twin. Get out of here.
Yeah. Like, you need to know, and you need to drop hints. You have to,
especially with twins, because I'm sorry, if my character has a twin, even if that twin is not involved in the plot of this story, a twin is a very unique thing, and the connection that twins share in our real world is very different from normal connections between other siblings. And for you to have a character who is a twin and never acknowledge that aspect of their personality until the secret twin shows up, that's bullshit, man. Like, you wrote some shit and you just made like, oh, secret twin. Like, nah.
One of my,
you gotta do the legwork.
The last time I ever saw that pulled off was, it's in a Bollywood movie. It's Doom 3. It's the third movie in the Doom series. It's DHOOM. If you like crazy over the top action movies, I highly recommend them. But you really have to also like Bollywood. But there's a secret twin in there that gets revealed fairly early on in the plot, in the story, but no one else knows. And so you're led on
just the audience.
But if you're watching close enough before the reveal, you start realizing like they do this like thing where because he's a stage magician, and they do the shot counter shot, and you feel like he's just talking to himself putting the makeup on, but then you start noticing little things like rings are on the wrong finger, and you start noticing these little things between the two, like, wait, he put a different color eyeliner on in the one shot and not in the other shot. You start seeing these little differences, and you're like, oh, like they did that wonderful thing where you figured it out before they said it. And that's also a great thing. Anytime you can give that sense of, I got one over on the writer, do that to your readers. Like, try to set them up where they can put it together before you give it to them, because nothing will make a reader feel more satisfied than that moment of, wait a minute, am I right?
Yeah,
Because
especially if it's right before
feeling.
the reveal too. Like when you figure it out right before the reveal, you always feel like there's this incredible satisfaction of, oh man, like it's a cool twist reveal, but it's satisfying because they did the legwork to set it up, and therefore you were on the right track to figuring it out. Even if it was just before, you still got there. So two things about that. Number one, my favorite twin reveal is The Prestige, directed by Christopher Nolan. In that movie, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen The Prestige, there's two magicians, dueling magicians throughout the story. And the big trick that they are sort of battling over is the transported man. And one of them does it very practically, and the other one has to go really outlandish to make his work. And the how each trick works is the big twist at the end of the movie. And what I found really interesting, especially rewatching it with people who hadn't seen it before, which is something I love doing, is rewatching stuff that I've seen with people who haven't seen it. Everyone figures out one of them, and it's never the same one. I figured out that Hugh Jackman's character was cloning himself, and that's how he was accomplishing the transported man. I did not figure out that Christian Bale's character had a twin, and that's how he was doing it. And other people, vice versa, will figure out the twin twist and never see the clone twist coming. And I find that incredibly interesting for storytelling purposes. Watch that movie, study how he does it, because all the clues are there for both. You just have to know where to look, and one will grab your imagination and roll with it, and the other one will blindside you. And the other thing about that was that recently I saw a writer giving advice on a video about how to create twists in your story. And he broke it down to these four things. Number one, tell the audience a lie. Number two, drop hints to the twist. But number three, all those hints reinforce the lie. So that when you reveal the truth, which is the fourth point, you reveal the truth, it all makes sense because the hints were hinting towards the truth, but the hints were reinforcing the lie that you believed. And that like got me like really rolling with like twists and stuff like that. Like this idea of setting it up by first lying to your audience and then telling them truths that they're just using to reinforce that original lie.
Yeah, I use the basic format in which I write most of my stuff is a Japanese form called Kisho Tenketsu, which is introduction to development, twist, and then reconciliation, where you bring it back together. And the whole goal is that you set this up as a nesting doll throughout the story. So every chapter, every scene, every part of the book, and the whole story should have these four parts repeated throughout it. And yeah, making sure that those twists either work out the gate or are reconcilable back in, because it can also be very effective to blindside an audience with something as long as the payoff is worth it. But that's the thing, you are that's the playing with dynamite. that's sculpting with dynamite when you do it. Like if the payoff is worth it and definitely makes the story better and does not invalidate the story up to that point.
Hmm.
You can do it. I make sure that you have beta readers that have no idea it's coming, and see how angry they get at you before you let yourself do that. But yeah, I always bake a good twist into your story somewhere, even if it's just in the character motivation, or maybe it's something as simple as them finally realizing that their outward goal and their inner need are very, very different, and you just kind of hide that bit of their inner life to them until they get to that moment of realization. You know, make sure that you have that in there. That discovery is so fun
And important.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, man. Any more thoughts on world building in general? Things that we haven't gotten to, things you really wanted to cover?
Just the last thing that I would say about this is just two points. One, decide going in whether you want to do top down or bottom up world building, and which one brings you the most joy. Top down, you create the world before the story, and bottom up, you create the world from the story. I have on numerous occasions written a dirty zero draft, pulled out all of the world building elements, built them up, and then turned it into a full-fledged first draft. So whichever one of those works best for you, learn your style, because what works for me will probably not work for you because we're different writers. Every writer has a different style. Pick and choose what works best for you. So
Agreed.
That is the most important thing, especially with world building advice, because once you find that magic formula that works for you, it is so easy to come across as, I have found the key to nirvana. Let me share it with you. Here's how you open the gates to Shambhala. And you haven't. You found that trick for you. It won't necessarily work for others. The other thing is, figure out what it is about your story that fascinates you.
Sorry if you guys can hear my kids. They're running around screaming right now.
It's all right. Figure out what it is about your story that fascinates you. What is it at the core of your story that makes you want to tell it more than anything else? Document it. Document it. Write it down. Maybe in your journal, maybe on a sheet of paper that you keep with you, maybe in with your world building notes, but document it. So whenever you get to that inevitable point in your project where you go, why am I doing this? Why have I done this to myself? Why? This is the dumbest thing ever. Because trust me, I've been through enough writing projects over the years. You will hit it. You can pull that out, see why you were inspired to do it in the first place, what fascinated you about it, rekindle that love to get you through to the end. Because nobody thinks that moment's going to happen. It will happen. It may be in drafting, it may be in editing, it may be in the publication process, but that moment will happen.
Yeah.
Build your bulwarks now so you can survive the armies when they come.
I have several things that I use for that purpose. My outline, in many ways, is one of those things that, like, when I'm feeling lost, I go back to the outline. The other is I at least in the early stages of writing, I subscribe to the snowflake method, where you spend so much time writing one perfect sentence to sum up your entire story. And then for a period of time, you work on expanding that to one paragraph. And then you expand that to a paragraph for each line, and so on. And it keeps growing, but it always maintains that original core idea. And so sometimes I'll go back to that original sentence, the original, like, summary of my story. What is my story really about? What is at the core of it? I tend to go back to that sometimes when I need to refocus. And then character profiles, for some reason, is the other one. Like, just going back and looking through again, like, things that I felt were important about my character when I created them, and maybe I've lost sight of, or I've forgotten about, or it's a smaller detail that hasn't been pertinent before. Whatever it is, just going through that will usually, like, I'm a strong believer that writer's block is not a real thing. Like
Same.
you just have to change up what you're doing, go back to basics. There's always something that you can do, and especially when you're writing a novel, there's always something else to be done. There's
Yep.
always work to be done. If today you're sitting down and the words are not coming, and none of your things to spark your ideas, then you know what, set it aside and work on something else. Maybe you need to do some character designs. Maybe you need to work on your map. Maybe you need to write up a blurb for your book. Whatever it is, like, there's always something else that needs to get done. There's no such thing as writer's block. Just shift your perspective a little bit.
There's a wonderful line in The War of Art where he says that
Love that book.
professional writers don't have the luxury of waiting for inspiration to come. And that is, like, if this is the job you want, if this is the job that you want, remember, pretty words come in the edit.
Mm-hmm.
Most of our writers block, especially when I talk to people, it's either they don't feel the prose is pretty enough right now, or that it's just the basics. Pretty comes in the edit. Pretty is for later. Now drafting is whatever it needs to be to get it on the page. If you have the pretty image now, write the pretty image now. If you don't, just write, they walked down the street, they talked about Joe and what Joe did last night, and then they went home and went to bed.
Yeah. If that's all you can get out of it, write that much and move on.
Because if you really want to be in this industry, you have to be creative. Like and it's terrible because I suffer from depression and anxiety, and there are days when I do not want to be sitting in front of my laptop and getting words down.
Yeah,
I know those feelings. I know those days, and that's why I embrace the zero draft. Like, I'm going to write terrible work today that I'm going to look back on, and hopefully it's clear enough that I can make, it'll be fixed in the edit. It'll be fixed in the edit.
A few, adages that we hear a lot. Number one, the first draft, I think Terry Pratchett says this, the first draft is you telling yourself the story. You're not telling anyone else the story until the second draft. So that's number one. Number two, you can't edit a blank page, right? Just even if what you're writing is garbage, that's fine because you're writing, and editing will fix that later.
Yeah.
Like it's all about your mindset when you're writing.
Yes, it really is. And just remember, a lot of times when you experience writer's block, you're holding on to your idea too tight and it can't breathe. Step back, take a moment, dance to a song, meditate for a little bit, whatever works for you.
Yeah.
But get a breath, because so often I've found with myself and with other people that I've worked with over the years that writer's block is just them going, why aren't you giving me a story?
Yeah.
Like, because you can't hear me because you're yelling and squishing me. Let me have a minute, because I've been there. I know that feeling, but open it up, let it out.
Kat is saying very much what you're saying right now. Step back from it, do something else. Get your juices flowing. You know what I mean? Like, switch things up. It could just be that where you're sitting is not a good place to be writing, and you need to move it over to the couch or to the bed or whatever. Like, be comfortable and
also learn what counts as your process. I learned a couple years into writing, like when I started doing it more full time, that a chunk of my process is coming up with an idea and then finding something so engrossing and engaging that I lose track of time that has nothing to do with it. And so whether that's a city builder game, or like right now it's Valheim, like I start playing and then my alarm goes off and says it's time for bed. And I go, wait, what? Because my unconscious mind needs time to chew the idea over. And if I don't let my unconscious play with the mind without my conscious mind fiddling around with it at all, it'll take me forever to get where I need to go. And I've learned that about my own process. Find yours, and it'll take some fiddling over time, but you'll figure out those things that you need to do so that your creativity keeps flowing. How are you going to fill yourself up, and how are you going to let the ideas actually blossom and embrace your weird? We don't need cookie cutter stories.
Agreed. Embrace your weird. I love that.
Well, they already have algorithms now that are writing fiction. Like,
oh, jeez.
No, a lot of children's books that are available in the market now are procedurally generated. Like that's been a thing for about 5 years now, and they're working on more. Like stories are cheap. Like, we like to think that our stories are precious. The story itself isn't precious. The story is, Bob went to the store and picked up a ring for his girlfriend. Anybody can tell that story. What's interesting is how you tell it. That's the uniqueness that you have. Anybody can write your story. If I gave my outline to everybody in chat right now, and we all wrote a draft of chapter 1, it would be completely different. No two of us would write the same chapter 1, even if we were working off the same outline. So embrace your weird, embrace your quirks, find those things that make you, because that's going to be what distinguishes us from others and from the robots when they come to take our jobs.
Which apparently they're already doing.
Yes.
Agreed. Right on. Charlie, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for your knowledge, your expertise. It looks like I have a new subscriber. So it looks like maybe one of your clan has come over to the dark side. I love it. Real quick, I want to remind everybody one more time about the Greenleaf interview coming on Tuesday. And for that, I've prepared this. All right, everybody, be here on Tuesday, 4 p.m. for that awesome interview. Next Sunday, I'll be talking with my good friend Stephanie Straffus, who works for the State Department and has lived in over 5 countries in the last so many years. And she's going to be with us, not in any official capacity, but to tell us stories and insights about living among different cultures in our world. And hopefully we can draw from her insights and use that in our world building. Learn a little bit about how each country is vastly different from the other, and apply that to our world building, as we were talking earlier today. Just really diversifying your world and making it believable and making it grounded in some semblance of reality. And that's what makes fiction really, come to life. So be here for that next Sunday. Don't forget about the Greenleaf interview this Tuesday. Everybody in the chat, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your questions and for interacting. Charlie, once again, if you would just rattle off a couple of your plugs here, let everybody know where they can find you.
All right, check out my channel. I am CE Dorsett on here, and if you want to hear the weird music that I do, I also have a channel called Project Shadow on YouTube as well. You can find links to everything I do at projectshadow.com. But if you want more of me prattling on about world building, I have an entire podcast. It's called Myth Weaving. It is everywhere podcasts are found, and it's hours and hours and hours, because when lockdown happened, I had this idea of, everybody needs something to do. And so I started a world building course, and we've gone through World Building 101 and 201. So we cover all the basics and then get into the nitty gritty on there. So
that sounds awesome.
It's a lot.
I'm going to check that out. I didn't know about the podcast, so I'm excited. I'm going to check it out. Kent, way to show up at the very end, buddy. How are you? All right. So thank you, everybody, for being here once again. Don't miss out on the upcoming streams. Don't forget the Flash Fiction contest. In fact, let's go ahead and, for good measure, throw that one up too. 800 words max, in by the 15th. You can email it to booksbyadrian@gmail.com. You can go to booksbyadrian.com, scroll down just a little bit. You'll see the Flash Fiction Musical Score Contest. You can submit right through there if you don't feel like opening up your email. Just click that one button. It'll self-populate everything. All you have to do is attach the file. Up to 800 words. Doesn't have to be 800 words. Send me anything. But I'm looking for emotion. The most emotional story is going to win. I'm going to turn that into an audiobook reading, and then we're going to send that to the musician who's going to compose an original score for that story and teach us all about music and storytelling through music on a live stream Sunday next month. So make sure that you guys send in your entries, and I look forward to reading them all and judging you all very harshly. All right, y'all. Thank you so much. And we'll see you we'll see you this Tuesday and then again next Sunday. Thanks again, Charlie. Thank you so much for being
anytime.
here. And you're welcome back anytime, by the way. Let me know. All right, guys. Here we go. We're going to sign out. And...